Dr. Emily Hart stood on the observation deck of the medical transport ship Solace Wing, watching the endless dark of space stretch beyond the reinforced glass. The fleet she commanded was not built for war or conquest. It existed for something far more fragile, life that was breaking, life that needed saving, life that most others had already given up on. The convoy carried thousands of refugees from multiple star systems. Some were survivors of orbital station collapses, others from planetary outbreaks, and many were soldiers who had survived battles but not the damage done after them. Cryopods lined the lower decks. Medical bays were full. Automated healing units moved quietly through corridors, repairing bodies that had once been declared lost. Emily had trained her whole life for medicine, not command. Yet here she was, responsible for lives across 12 massive transport ships and 6 smaller support vessels. Her eyes were calm, but her mind never stopped working. Every small delay, every system warning, every faint change in life support readings mattered. She turned slightly as Captain Ethan Cole entered the room. He was from Earth's diplomatic escort forces, assigned to protect the convoy during its passage through neutral space. He wore a standard Navy uniform, simple and practical, with no decorations that meant anything in deep space. His presence was steady, like someone who had learned to stay calm even when everything else was not. "Status report," Emily asked quietly. "All ships stable," Ethan replied. "No external contact in the last 4 hours. But this region is still unpredictable." Emily nodded. She already knew what he meant. Neutral corridors were only neutral in name. In reality, they were empty stretches of space where laws were weak and enforcement weaker. Pirates, rogue coalitions, and broken factions often treated them as hunting grounds. Outside the window, stars drifted slowly as the fleet moved forward in formation. Each ship kept precise distance, following strict travel patterns designed to avoid collisions and minimize detection signatures. The convoy was large, but it was not heavily armed. Its purpose was healing, not fighting. Commander Adam Blake stood nearby, reviewing tactical displays projected into the air. He was younger than most officers in command positions, but his expression carried a weight that came from experience rather than age. He had seen enough border conflicts to understand what happened when kindness entered unsafe space. "We are exposed here," Adam said after a moment. "Too exposed." Emily glanced at him. "We are under concordance protection agreements." Adam gave a slight shake of his head. "Agreements do not stop people who don't follow them." Ethan looked at both of them. "Our escort strength is limited. We are here as deterrence, not domination. If something large targets this convoy, we will not hold for long." Emily did not respond immediately. Instead, she looked back at the ships outside. One of them carried a full trauma recovery unit. Another carried hundreds of cryopreserved civilians waiting for treatment once they reached safe territory. Another was filled with children from a mining colony that had collapsed weeks ago. These were not soldiers. These were not assets. They were survivors. "That is why we must succeed," she said finally. The convoy had already passed through 3 systems without incident. Each system had grown more uncertain than the last. The farther they moved from core civilized space, the thinner protection became. Earth's presence in the escort group was small compared to older interstellar powers, but it was known for reliability. Earth ships did not break formation easily. They did not abandon missions once committed. Still, Adam's concern lingered in the air like a shadow. He tapped his console and brought up a sector map. "This corridor ahead is known for missing traffic logs. Ships enter and do not always report out. No confirmed authority controls it." Ethan studied the map. "So we are passing through blind space." "Yes," Adam said. "And blind space attracts things that do not want to be seen." Emily listened carefully. She had always believed in systems, treaties, and shared responsibility between civilizations. But deep down, she also knew that space did not care about belief. Space only cared about what could survive it. A soft alert chimed from the ship's communication array. A routine update from the rear medical vessel confirmed stable conditions. A patient in critical recovery had just regained consciousness after 17 days in stasis. Small victories like that were what kept the fleet moving forward. Emily allowed herself a brief moment of relief. "At least we are making progress," she said. Ethan nodded. "We are. That is why we must keep moving." But Adam did not relax. His eyes stayed on the outer readings. Passive sensors were normal, but something about the corridor ahead felt too empty. Not peaceful, empty in a way that suggested observation without presence. "Captain," Adam said, turning slightly toward Ethan, "request permission to increase escort sensor range. I want early detection buffer extended." Ethan considered for a moment, then nodded. "Approved. But keep emissions low. We cannot advertise our position." Adam returned to his console immediately, adjusting settings. Subtle changes in energy output rippled through the escort ships as systems expanded their awareness range. Nothing unusual appeared. No signals. No threats. Only silence. Still, Adam did not like silence. Emily watched him for a moment. "You expect trouble," she said softly. "I expect possibility," Adam replied. And in this region, possibility often becomes reality. The convoy continued forward. The stars ahead seemed unchanged, but every officer on board felt the same quiet tension. Even the medical staff, usually focused only on patients, moved with slightly more caution. The fleet's purpose had always been healing, but healing meant nothing if they did not survive the journey. Ethan stepped closer to the window. "We are Earth's responsibility here," he said. "We will not fail them." Emily looked at him. "And if we are tested?" Ethan's answer was simple. "Then we respond." Adam did not speak, but his expression tightened slightly. He had seen responses before. Some were controlled. Some were not. And in space, response often came too late or too harsh. The convoy drifted deeper into the corridor, unaware of how quiet space could become just before everything changed. Behind them, the systems recorded nothing unusual. No enemy signals. No known threats. Only darkness stretching forward like an unanswered question. And in that silence, the Mercy convoy continued its path, carrying hope through a place that did not guarantee survival. The convoy moved deeper into the silent corridor, unaware that the emptiness around them was not natural. It was prepared. For several minutes, everything seemed normal. The medical ships maintained formation. Life support readings stayed steady. The wounded continued their fragile recovery inside sealed chambers. Emily Hart remained on the Solace wing, reviewing patient logs while speaking quietly with medical staff over internal channels. Then the first warning came. A sharp pulse of energy struck the outer escort grid. It was not loud. It was not visible at first. But every ship in the convoy felt it at the same moment, like a sudden pressure change in space itself. Captain Ethan Cole straightened immediately. "Report." "Shield interference detected," one officer said, fingers moving fast over controls. "Unknown source. Multiple vectors." Before anyone could react further, a second wave hit. This one was stronger. It did not just strike shields, it bent them. The protective fields around the convoy flickered like failing light. Commander Adam Blake's voice cut through the bridge. "We are being targeted. This is coordinated." Alarms began to rise across all ships at once. Not one system failure, but many. Navigation arrays blinked off. External sensors went blind. Communication lines started to break into static. Emily felt the change instantly through the ship's vibration. Something had entered the convoy's space without warning. Distress channels, she asked quickly. A technician shook his head. Blocked. Fully jammed. We cannot send or receive outside signals. That was the moment silence turned into panic. On the edge of the convoy, the first unknown vessels appeared. They did not announce themselves. They did not request surrender. They simply emerged from dark space using stealth fields that bent light and sensor readings around them. Then they attacked. Energy beams struck the outer medical carriers. Not to destroy immediately, but to disable. Shield generators collapsed under focused fire. Engines stalled. Entire ships drifted without control. Captain Ethan shouted orders. Escort ships, defensive formation. Protect the medical carriers. Earth's escort vessels responded quickly. They were not large warships, but they were disciplined. They moved to intercept incoming attackers, firing defensive countermeasures and attempting to shield the convoy's center. But the attackers were already inside. Boarding pods launched from hidden craft. They moved fast, attaching to medical ships before defense systems could fully respond. Magnetic clamps locked onto hulls. Cutting tools burned through outer layers. Emily Hart's ship shuddered as an impact hit the lower section. What was that? She asked, gripping the railing. Boarding attempt, Ethan replied through internal comms. They are inside the convoy. That sentence changed everything. Inside the medical ships, alarms triggered. Doors sealed. Emergency lights turned red. But it was already too late for some sections. On the Mercy Dawn, one of the largest medical transports, attackers entered the biotech storage bays first. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They wore compact armored suits designed for speed and extraction. Their movements were efficient, almost mechanical. They ignored patients completely. They went straight for the medical cores, regeneration units, and AI-assisted healing systems. Devices that could rebuild organs, stabilize neural damage, and restore broken bodies were ripped from their secured stations. One technician tried to block them. He was pushed aside without hesitation. No words were spoken by the attackers. No demands were made. Only action. Emily received fragmented reports through emergency channels. Her display flickered with broken images, corridors filled with smoke, medics pulling injured patients into sealed rooms, emergency shutters closing too slowly. Then she saw it. A live feed from one of the internal ship cameras. A boarding team dragging a biocore unit out of a secured vault. The unit was still active, glowing softly as it was disconnected from life support systems. Emily's voice broke slightly. They are stealing everything. Ethan's reply was controlled, but sharp. They are not here to negotiate. Commander Adam Blake's voice came next, tighter than before. Enemy numbers unknown. They are spreading through the convoy faster than we can track. Outside, space itself looked like it was breaking apart. Ships drifted without control. Some collided gently due to lost navigation. Others were held hostage by boarding clamps that drained power from their systems. Then came the worst moment. The main medical carrier, Solace Wing, received an internal breach alert. Multiple boarding points had activated simultaneously. The attackers were inside. Emily stood still for half a second. Then she activated emergency internal lockdowns. Seal all medical bays, she ordered. Move patients to core shelters. Do not open any external access. Yes, doctor, came the response, but it was already chaotic. On the screen, she saw emergency footage of corridors filling with smoke and flashing lights. Medics were pulling patients into sealed pods. Some patients were still unconscious, unable to understand what was happening. One of the attackers entered a recovery room. A child was inside a stasis chamber. Emily looked away for a moment, unable to continue watching. Captain Ethan's voice returned, now heavier. "Emily, we are losing control of the convoy." She forced herself to respond. "How many ships still responsive?" A pause. "Less than half." Outside, the convoy that had once been a symbol of mercy was now scattered and broken. Ships drifted in silence. Others burned with internal fires. Boarding teams continued extracting technology and disabling systems. And through all of it, the attackers kept moving without hesitation, as if the convoy was nothing more than a resource field to be harvested. Emily opened a direct channel to all remaining ships. Her voice was steady, but quiet. "This is Dr. Emily Hart. We are under full assault. Save the patients first. Systems can be rebuilt. Lives cannot." Then the signal began to break again. Before it cut out completely, her final transmission showed the convoy collapsing into chaos, ships drifting, lights flickering, emergency signals fading into static. And then there was only silence where the Mercy convoy had once traveled whole. Director Sarah Bennett had been reviewing routine reports when the first fragment of the convoy footage arrived. At first, it looked like a normal system alert. Distorted signals. Broken transmission data. Then the real feed stabilized for a few seconds. What she saw made her stop breathing for a moment. Medical ships drifting without power. Emergency lights flashing through smoke-filled corridors. Silent evacuation pods floating away from broken hulls. And in the background, unidentified ships moving through the convoy like shadows that did not care what they touched. She did not speak. The room around her continued working. Officers checked systems. Analysts spoke into comms. But Sarah Bennett stayed still, eyes locked on the screen. Then a second feed arrived. It showed inside one of the medical carriers. A corridor filled with injured civilians being moved through emergency lockdowns. Then sudden movement. Boarding teams entering. Medical staff trying to block them. And failing. A stretcher tipped over. A patient still connected to life support was left behind as systems were ripped from the walls. Sarah's hands slowly tightened on the edge of the console. She had seen conflict before. She had signed off on defensive actions. She had approved evacuations from war zones. But this was different. This was not a battlefield. This was a healing fleet. She turned slightly without looking away from the screen. "Get Admiral Hayes." Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made the room quiet immediately. Within minutes, Admiral William Hayes arrived. He took one look at the display and did not ask questions. He had served long enough to recognize what kind of silence was happening. Sarah replayed the core segment of the footage. No words were spoken for several seconds. Only the sound of distant alarms and broken transmissions filled the room. When it ended, Sarah finally spoke. "They attacked medical vessels," she said. Hayes nodded once. "Confirmed?" "Yes," she replied. "Fully confirmed." The Admiral's expression did not change, but his eyes hardened slightly. "Status of convoy?" "Half lost contact," one analyst answered. "Remaining ships are compromised or drifting. Boarding activity still ongoing." Sarah finally turned away from the screen. "They targeted a healing fleet," she said again, slower this time, as if trying to understand it herself. Admiral Hayes stepped forward and reviewed the data more closely. "They are choosing what to take and what to discard," Hayes replied. "And they are doing it inside a medical fleet." A silence followed. Then Sarah spoke again, her voice lower now. "How long until we can respond?" Hayes did not hesitate. "We can respond now. But not with standard protocol." He tapped a secure command interface. A warning symbol appeared on the screen. "Ares Response Directive, Classified." Sarah read it silently. Everyone in the room knew what it meant. It was not a normal military escalation. It was a planetary-level emergency system designed for situations where restraint was no longer considered safe. She looked at Hayes. "You are recommending full activation." He nodded once. "I am not recommending it. I am confirming it." Another pause followed. Sarah turned back to the footage of the convoy. Emily Hart's fragmented distress signals were still playing in loops, broken images of medical corridors, drifting ships, and collapsing systems. "They did not attack a fleet," Sarah said softly. "They attacked what we sent to save lives." Hayes stepped closer. "Which is why this cannot remain limited." The room waited. Sarah finally straightened. "Classify the incident," she said. "Immediate priority 1." An officer responded quickly. "Classification." Her voice became firm. "Humanitarian breach. Extinction level severity." The room went completely silent after that. Every person there understood what that classification meant. It was not just about casualties. It was about intent. About what had been violated. Sarah continued. "Authorize Ares' response." Admiral Hayes did not hesitate. Authorization confirmed. The system changed instantly. Across Earth's military network, dormant channels activated. Deep space fleets received sealed orders. Autonomous defense systems began unlocking protocols that had not been used in generations. But there was no celebration. No relief. Only a cold sense of movement beginning. Sarah looked at the broken convoy footage one more time. "Find out who did this," she said quietly. "We already are," Hayes replied. "And when we find them?" Hayes did not answer immediately. He watched the screen as another medical ship went dark. Then he said, "We ensure they understand what a protected line means." Sarah nodded slowly. The command center shifted into full operational mode. Lights dimmed slightly as systems redirected power. Fleet coordination algorithms activated across multiple regions of space. Earth was not reacting emotionally. It was transitioning. From observation, to action. From restraint, to response. And far out in the corridor where the convoy had been ambushed, the attackers continued their work, unaware that something far heavier than resistance was already moving toward them. Back on Earth, Sarah Bennett gave the final confirmation to all command channels. Ares' response is active. The moment Ares' response activated, space around Earth's fleet networks changed in a way that could not be mistaken for routine defense. It was not loud. It was not chaotic. It was controlled. Far from the ambushed convoy, hidden systems that had been dormant for years began to wake. Deep space communication relays that normally waited for months without use suddenly came online. Automated fleets that had been parked in silent orbit shifted from standby to full readiness. And then Earth moved. There were no warnings sent to the attackers. No final demands. No negotiations. The decision had already been made the moment the convoy footage was confirmed. The first strike was invisible. Across the corridor where the medical fleet had been attacked, communication networks belonging to the unknown factions began to fail. Not by jamming, but by removal. Nodes stopped responding. Relay chains collapsed one after another. Coordination channels that had once allowed the attackers to move as one suddenly went dark. Within minutes, their entire system of command lost cohesion. On board one of the enemy ships, alarms began to sound as internal systems tried to reach their network. Nothing answered back. Tactical displays flickered. Orders stopped arriving. Confusion spread faster than fear. They had expected resistance. They had expected counterfire. What they had not expected was silence that erased their ability to function. In Earth command centers, Director Sarah Bennett watched the progress with a steady expression. Admiral William Hayes stood beside her, reviewing fleet deployment patterns as autonomous units moved into position. "This is Phase 1, Hayes said quietly. Sarah nodded. "They are blind now." "Yes," he replied. "And soon, they will be separated." Far beyond Earth, the response fleets arrived. They did not travel in one group. They entered in layers. Some already positioned in nearby systems, others emerging from long-range transit corridors that bypassed normal detection routes. Autonomous drones moved first. Small, fast, and silent. They slipped through debris fields and communication gaps, locating enemy relay stations and disabling them without engaging in open combat. Their purpose was not destruction for its own sake. It was removal of structure. Without structure, the attackers could not fight as a coordinated force. Then came the strike fleets. Commander Adam Blake, now assigned tactical coordination in the field due to his prior contact with the convoy, watched the battlefield unfold through layered displays aboard the lead escort ship. He had survived the first attack. He had seen the broken convoy. Now he was no longer in a defensive role. He was in control of engagement. "Enemy coordination is collapsing," one of his officers reported. "Good," Adam said. His voice was calm, but firm. "Keep pressure on their outer grid. Do not let them regroup." Earth ships moved in precise formation. They did not rush. They did not scatter. They surrounded zones where enemy activity still remained active and began dismantling it piece by piece. Weapon systems on enemy vessels tried to respond, but their targeting data was incomplete. Their coordination signals were gone. They were firing without unified direction. It was not a battle of strength anymore. It was a breakdown. One by one, enemy support ships went silent. Not always destroyed, sometimes simply Final engagement phase, Adam said. His crew acknowledged. Earth ships moved in together now, not as scattered units, but as a unified closing formation. The enemy had no central command left to coordinate defense or retreat. Every attempt to regroup failed as soon as it formed. Adam watched carefully, ensuring that no surviving hostile unit could re-establish control over the region. And through it all, one thought stayed constant among Earth forces. This was not about conquest. It was about ensuring that what had happened to the healing convoy could never be repeated by those who believed mercy was weakness. As the last layers of enemy coordination systems collapsed, space around the convoy corridor became quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not empty. Controlled. And for the first time since the attack began, Earth forces prepared to move from counterstrike to recovery. Within hours of Earth's counterstrike reaching full scale, the attackers were no longer a unified force. They were fragments. Ships that once moved together in coordinated ambush patterns now drifted alone in empty space. Some had lost all communication. Some had lost navigation. Others had simply shut down internal systems to avoid detection, hoping silence would save them. It did not. Earth's drones continued their slow, precise work through the region, not chasing every target in anger, but ensuring that no remaining structure could rebuild itself into something dangerous again. Relay stations stayed dark. Command links remained broken. Any attempt to reconnect failed immediately, as if space itself refused to carry their signals anymore. Commander Adam Blake watched the final zone stabilize. His escort fleet remained in position, but there was no longer anything forming against them. What had once been an organized assault had become scattered survival. Enemy coordination fully dissolved, an officer reported. Adam nodded once. Status of convoy survivors. Another pause followed. The answer came carefully. Partial recovery possible. Several medical ships still intact but disabled. Emergency beacons are active, but most crews are unresponsive or in lockdown. Adam's expression tightened slightly. The battle was over, but the cost remained visible in every fragment of data still coming through. On Earth, Director Sarah Bennett stood in the command center, watching the same reports as they finalized across global systems. Admiral William Hayes stood beside her, arms crossed, silent as fleet status updates continued to stream in. No one spoke for a moment. Not because there was nothing to say, but because everything had already been decided in action. Finally, Sarah spoke. "It is done." Hayes nodded. "The threat structure is gone." "And the convoy?" "We are sending recovery fleets now," he said. "Medical extraction teams will arrive within standard transit windows." Sarah looked at the final image still displayed on the central screen. It showed the convoy corridor where the attack had taken place. Broken ships. Silent wreckage. Floating medical units still blinking weak emergency lights in the dark. She did not look away, but her voice stayed steady. "They chose a healing fleet," she said quietly. Hayes replied without hesitation. "And learned what that choice costs." Across interstellar communication channels, Earth prepared a broadcast. It was not a long message. It was not filled with explanation or justification. It was one line, encoded for universal transmission across all known networks. Every major relay, every open channel, every intercepted signal path received it at once. Earth's voice did not shout. It simply spoke. "Harming healers ends civilizations." There was no signature attached at first. No diplomatic formatting. No request for acknowledgement. It was just a statement, delivered with complete certainty. In distant systems, it was received in silence. Some factions replayed it multiple times, trying to understand if it was a threat or a declaration. Others attempted to trace the origin of the transmission, only to find that the signal had been broadcast through multiple redundant Earth-linked channels at once, making it impossible to block or erase completely. Commander Adam Blake received it aboard his ship as well. He read it once, then looked out at the dark space where the convoy had been attacked. He did not speak for a long time. Around him, the crew continued recovery operations, but the tone had shifted. There was no confusion now. Only quiet focus on rescue. "Commander," one of his officers said carefully, "enemy remnants are requesting emergency status classification. They are attempting to identify safe surrender corridors." Adam finally turned back. "They should have thought about safety before targeting medical ships." The officer nodded and returned to work. On Earth, Sarah Bennett finally stepped away from the main display. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, though her expression remained serious. "Will this happen again?" she asked. Hayes considered the question carefully. "Not in the same way," he said. "The message will spread faster than any fleet." Sarah nodded slowly. "Good." But there was no satisfaction in her voice. Only understanding. In the following hours, recovery fleets reached the convoy corridor. What they found was not a battlefield in the traditional sense. It was a scattered disaster zone. Medical ships drifting but still holding life inside. Emergency systems struggling to maintain stability. Survivors waiting in sealed compartments, unaware that help had finally arrived. Earth teams moved quickly, prioritizing life over everything else. Every ship that could be saved was stabilized first. Every patient that could be reached was transferred into secure medical recovery units. Commander Adam Blake oversaw coordination from the field, ensuring no remaining hostile presence interfered with recovery operations. There were none left to resist. Only silence remained where the attackers once operated. As hours passed, reports began to return to Earth from multiple systems. The same message was being repeated across channels by different civilizations who had intercepted it. Some called it warning. Some called it doctrine. Some simply called it truth. But all of them understood one thing clearly. Earth had not responded to war. Earth had responded to a violation of mercy. And in doing so, it had drawn a line across space that others would think twice before crossing again. Back in the convoy corridor, Emily Hart's surviving transmission logs were finally stabilized and recovered. Her voice, though broken in earlier fragments, was now being reconstructed for analysis and medical review. She had been trying to save lives until the very end. When Adam Blake reviewed the restored footage, he stayed silent for a long moment. Then he simply said, "We got here too late." No one corrected him. Because it was true. But what mattered now was that they had arrived at all. And as Earth fleets continued recovery, the final message remained active across the galaxy, carried through every channel that had once carried signals of war, now overwritten by a single reminder that would not fade quickly. Harming healers ends civilizations. And this time, no one doubted it.